Magic and Mystery in Tibet by Alexandra David-Neel. Chapter 4, Dealing with Ghosts and Demons. The first time that I started alone for one of these strange peregrinations, I stopped near a clear lake set between two stony shores. The surrounding landscape, completely barren and impassive, excluded all feelings of fear or of security, of joy or of sadness. There one felt oneself sinking into a bottomless abyss of indifference. Evening darkened the bright mirror of the lake, while I mused on the strange mind of the race that has invented chod and so many other grim practices. The fantastic procession of clouds lighted by the moon marched along the neighboring summits and descended towards the valleys surrounding me, with a troop of nebulous phantoms. One of them came forward, walking alone over a path of light, suddenly spread out on the dark water, like a carpet before his steps. The transparent giant, whose eyes were two stars, made a gesture with his long arm emerging from a floating robe. Did he call me? Did he drive me away? I could not tell. Then he approached still nearer, looking so real, so lifelike, that I closed my eyes to dispel the hallucination. I felt myself wrapped in the folds of soft, cold cloak, whose subtle substance penetrated me, causing me to shiver. What strange visions must the sons of these haunted wilds behold? These novices brought up in superstition, sent by their spiritual fathers through the night all alone, their imagination excited by the maddening rites. How many times in the storms sweeping across the high tablelands, they must hear their challenge answered and shudder with terror in their tiny tent, miles and miles away from all human beings. I very well understood the fear experienced by some celebrants of the chod, yet I thought there was much exaggeration in the stories circulated about the tragic effects of this rite, and I treated them with considerable skepticism. However, as the years went by, I gathered together a few facts which compelled me to have more faith in these tales. There is one that I will relate. At that time, I was camping in northern Tibet, in the desert or grassland. I had established myself in the vicinity of 3 black tents, inhabited by herdsmen who spent the summer with their cattle in a large pasture thang, Thang. And the footnote says, a thang is a tableland of level ground between hill ranges or a very wide valley. Chance, which is but an easy word to designate unknown causes, had led me there while hunting for butter, of which I had run short. These few cowherds happened to be good men. My presence near them as a lady lama, and also as a purchaser from whom silver might be obtained, did not displease them in the least. They offered to keep my horses and mules with their own, which would save my servants a good deal of work, and I decided to let the men and beasts enjoy a week of rest. 2 hours after my arrival, I already knew all about the neighboring region. Truly, there is not much to be said about it. The void immensity of the grassy solitudes extended towards the 4 quarters, broken only by streams and solitary hill ranges, which overlay the great sky, luminous and void. Yet there was an object of interest in that desert. I learned that a lama, whose seat was somewhat north among Mongolian tribes, had chosen a cave near my camp for practicing meditation during the summer months. With him, the cowherds said, were two trapas, his disciples, who lived in a small tent below their master's aesthetic lodging. Beside boiling tea, these two had no work to do, and they spent most of their time in religious exercises. They often wandered out at night, and no doubt I should sometimes hear the sounds of the damaras, canglings, and bells accompanied the celebration of nocturnal offices here or there on the hills. As for the Lama, whose name was Rabjams Gyatso, he had not left his cave since his arrival 3 months ago. From this information, I guessed that the Lama was engaged in the performance of a dub-tab or some other magic practice. And I'm going to spell dub-tab here. D-U-B-T-H-A-B. The following day at dawn, I started for the Lama's cave. I wanted to reach it while the trapas were busy in their tent with their morning devotions. I hoped, if I was not seen by them, to be able to approach their master unexpectedly and to have a look at what he was doing. This is not at all etiquette, but being well acquainted with the customs of Tibetan Lamas, I feared that Rabjams Gyatso would refuse to see me if I asked permission to pay him a visit. Guided by the directions which the cowherds had given me, I easily found the cave on a slope dominating a glen in which flowed a purling brook. A low wall built of stones, sods, and turf, and a curtain of rough yak hair had been added to the prehistoric dwelling to provide the Lama with some sort of comfort and to hide him from passers-by. My stratagem met with failure. As I climbed towards the cave, I met a sickly-looking, matted-haired fellow dressed in ragged, aesthetic garb who stopped me. I had difficulty in persuading him to go to his master and beg me for the favor of an interview. The answer which he brought was polite, but negative. The Lama said he could not see me, but that if I would come again in a fortnight, he would receive me. As I had already planned to stay where I was for another week, and indeed was not in a hurry to continue my journey, there was no special reason against some further delay. But on the other hand, I did not know whether it was worthwhile waiting for the Lama. I merely told the Trapa that I might return, but would not engage to do so. Twice a day, one or another of the Lama's disciples passed my tent to fetch milk from the cowherds. The lean young man who had stopped me near the Lama's cave attracted my attention by his wretched appearance. I thought that I might help him with some medicine and made up my mind to have a talk with him. At my first words about medical treatment, he denied that he was suffering from any kind of illness, and as I pressed him with questions about the cause of his skeleton-like appearance, an expression of intense terror appeared in his wild eyes. It was impossible to obtain any explanation from him. I told my servants to try and learn something about the matter from his companion, but he too evaded all questions. Unlike the majority of Tibetans, who are rather talkative folk, these men were both uncommonly silent. After my inquiries, they went to the Dokpa's tents by a roundabout way to avoid my camp, and as it was clear that they did not want me to interfere, even in order to help them, I let them alone. I had been staying there for 7 days when I was informed that a man had died among the group of herdsmen established about a mile away in the middle of the Thang, and this decided me to postpone my departure to witness the rustic funeral. In great haste, 2 riders set off for a lama's camp, or as Dokpas call it, Banag Gompa, that is to say, a monastery composed of an agglomeration of black tents situated 2 days' journey from their home. They were to request the service of 2 monks, perform the rite of the dead. Only the ecclesiastics belonging to the monastery with which a layman is connected as spiritual son or supporter are rightly entitled to attend his post-mortem needs. But, in the meantime, the disciples of the foreign lama, our neighbor, went each in turn to read religious books over the dead man. Some friends of the deceased who had learned the sad news arrived from different directions, bringing presents to console the family in their bereavement, and the riders returned with 2 monks and a few lay acquaintances. Then the chanting, ringing bells, beating of drums and cymbals by the trapas, and the copious eating and drinking by all concerned continued as usual in these circumstances in front of the decaying corpse, tied in many wrappings and seated in a big cauldron. At last, when it was over, the dead body was carried to a small tableland on the mountains, cut into pieces and abandoned there as supreme alms to the vultures. To edify the Dakpas in complying with the time-honored custom of their Naljarapas, whose costume I was wearing, I wrapped myself in a thick zen in quotes, at nightfall, and walked to the place where the corpse had been carried, to spend the night there in meditation. And then there's a footnote, and it says Zen, the toga worn by Buddhist monks and nuns. The moon was nearly full and beautifully lit up the immense plain extending from the foot of the hills, which I skirted, to other distant ranges. Nocturnal tramps in these solitudes have a peculiar charm. I could have walked for joy the whole night, but the cemetery, my goal, was less than an hour's march from my camp. As I neared it, I suddenly heard a strange sound. At the same time, hoarse and piercing, that broke the perfect stillness of the desert. It was repeated several times, rending it seemed, the calm atmosphere in which the sleeping steps lay. Then the rhythmic beating of the damaru followed. This language was clear to me. Someone, no doubt one of the Lama's disciples, had gone to the place and performed chod near the corpse. And I'm going to pause here and continue later. Till soon.